Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Long Walk Talks. My name is David Hensley. I'm the owner and creative director of Long Walk Productions, and I am joined today by my two co-hosts, Stan Wilson Lee.
Peace.
And Chris Wilson Barnes. I'm just throwing shit at the wall. I told you this. It's either that or stomp the yard.
For a second,
There
was a moment where my brain went.
Christopherson.
There was a moment where my brain was confused enough to be like, "Is that my name?"
That says more about you than it does about me, bud. And today on this episode, we are going to be continuing our Quentin Tarantino Quarantino discussion by discussing the film's Four Rooms, or specifically the Quentin Tarantino, The Man from Hollywood segment of the movie Four Rooms, and the movie From Dusk Till Dawn. And these are unique in his filmography in that one, he only directed the one segment of Four Rooms, and he did not direct From Dusk Till Dawn. That was Robert Rodriguez, but he did write the screenplay. So we're going to kick off the discussion with The Man from Hollywood from Four Rooms, because chronologically that takes place. That was released in 1995. So like we've been discussing on previous episodes, this is the Tarantino hot streak from Reservoir Dogs to True Romance to Pulp Fiction to Natural Born Killers, and now we're up to Four Rooms, and then in 96 From Dusk Till Dawn. So
Arguably this starts his maturity process, I think. From this point on, we get to see that he wasn't a flash in the pan.
Right.
Beforehand. Even though Four Rooms is definitely not my favorite of films he's involved in, and that it's basically just his segment that is actually the reason to see it.
Well, yeah.
And Tim Roth as the bellboy, I would give it.
So, Tarantino's segment, The Man from Hollywood, is worth watching. And it's the last one. It's the last of the four stories. And Rodriguez's is worth watching, The Misbehaviors. Yeah. The first two segments in Four Rooms are bad.
And I love Allison Anders, so.
Yeah.
But Madonna is not good.
No, Madonna's not good. The second, I can't even remember what the title of the second one is, but it involves Ted getting taken hostage by a jealous ex-husband. It's not good. But The Misbehaviors and The Man from Hollywood are really good.
Well, before we jump too far in, we should probably explain what the movie's about.
Yeah, so the film Four Rooms is about this poor, beleaguered bellhop named Ted, who is working by himself on New Year's Eve and has to try to navigate these situations that he finds himself in.
Yeah, it's basically four short movies with the through line of the recurring or the connective tissue is Ted the bellboy.
Yeah. So the first one is about a coven of witches that are staying in the hotel and need a special something from Ted for one of their spells.
Iona Sky is in that one, and it's Iona Sky, so that's worth watching for that. So, and she needs the special something.
Yes, and the second one, as I already mentioned, Ted is held hostage by a jealous ex-husband who is also holding his ex-wife hostage.
Played by Jennifer
Beals.
Jennifer Beals.
Yes.
You wouldn't stop saying her name before we started rolling, and now
I got confused.
You're on a full name basis with her, Jennifer Beals. The third film, The Misbehaviors, is directed by Robert Rodriguez, and it's about Ted getting stuck taking care of the two young children of a Hispanic man played by Antonio Banderas. And then the fourth film, The Man from Hollywood, which is the one Tarantino wrote and directed, and it's shot by the same director of photography that also shot Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. But it is about poor Ted having to deliver a cadre of weird items to the penthouse suite, which is currently occupied by Hollywood film director Chester Rush, his producer Leo, his star Norman, and for no apparent reason other than she ran into them in the lobby, Angela from the second one, the ex-wife that was taken hostage. Yes, Jennifer Beals.
So you get to see her twice.
And the reason we find out that Ted is there with all the weird items that he brought with him is because they are trying to recreate or reenact the plot of the old Twilight Zone short, The Man from Rio.
Well, it's
Alfred Hitchcock.
I'm sorry.
They do it based on they do it predicated on a bet.
Yeah.
Right.
Because Chester is betting his car that is what's the
It's a 1964 Chevy Chevelle.
no, I mean
Red.
Yeah, yes, a specific type of red. If you watch the short,
Yes.
The only mention.
no, I mean who's his star? The guy
Norman.
Yeah.
Norman wants Chester's 1964 red Chevy Chevelle and is willing to bet his pinky finger for it.
Yeah, that's the setup. The setup is in which they go into great detail about is it's The Man from Rio, an old episode of of Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Yes.
Which is based on a Roald Dahl.
Yeah, it's based on The Man from the South by Roald Dahl.
Isn't that then a double whammy for the movie? Because it sounds a lot like the first one. The first segment about a coven of witches sounds a lot like The Witches by Roald Dahl.
It is.
It diverges a bit.
A little bit, yeah. But essentially, this entire film, Chris and I were discussing this earlier today, this movie, or this short film, is a 20-minute setup to a 1-second punchline.
It's great.
Literally.
And I don't have any compunctions about giving spoilers for a 25-year-old film. They have to talk a very reluctant Ted into performing the action of cutting off Norman's finger.
Because what's supposed to happen is...
we haven't discussed
based
that
on
part.
the plot of The Man from Rio, Peter Lorre in that...
bet Steve McQueen.
that he couldn't light his lighter 10 times in a row successfully. If he did, he would get Peter Lorre's car. Fantastic car. If he didn't, Steve McQueen would have to cut off his pinky. And that is the bet they're reenacting here for Norman to get Chester's car.
Yes. And now they have a bucket of ice on hand so that they can take Norman to the hospital and get it reattached.
The setup isn't... I mean, they're drunk and high.
But
But
they have been drinking specifically Cristal, not
You hear
champagne.
a lot about it.
There's a lot of discussion about Cristal.
There's a commercial for Cristal.
Yeah, but as Tarantino's character Chester points out, by the way, the character of Chester Rush, the film director, is played by Quentin Tarantino. Mm-hmm. As he points out, they've got the bucket of ice on hand for the finger because he's not some sick son of a bitch who just goes around the country collecting pinky fingers.
I thought that was a nice touch. They're not just being just fucking like hedonistic dirt bags.
Right.
They are being hedonistic dirt bags, but there's like, I still care about you, and there's like, we're gonna get you patched up. We're just gonna enact this bet.
Yeah, I love the setup for that because this situation is already so weird. They are already willing to cut off a man's finger, but they're not willing to permanently disable him by taking away his finger. They're going to put it on ice. And I just love that. I'm not some sick son of a bitch.
He's Chester's star, so it's got to have some insurance in this and protection, I suppose.
Yeah, through dialogue, it's inferred that Norman was the star of Chester's last film. But after 20 minutes of trying to talk poor Ted into...
It leads to a great moment where he's like, give me 60 seconds of your time. You get $100 to listen to this pitch.
Yeah, $100 to listen to the pitch and an extra $900 if he agrees to do it. So $1,000. They lay it all out in front of him. I think Ted agrees.
He is so far gone. He's just so far into this is so wild that
because
he's like, okay.
Yeah, he spends the majority of The Man from Hollywood trying to get away from these crazy people who are drinking Cristal and have obviously been doing a lot of cocaine.
Also because his manager agreed to come take over for him. It's like all he had to do was just deliver that stuff and go.
Yeah.
That's all.
But now there's $1,000 on the table, so he takes up the butcher knife, which they keep referring to as a hatchet.
I'm guessing in the original they had a hatchet.
Probably.
Sharp enough to...
what is it? I can't remember exactly how Chester described it. It had a superlative attached to it.
Yeah.
Sharp enough to... Oh, shit.
But they are all set up. There's this beautiful overhead shot that pushes in and ducks down to go into a close-up.
Oh, it's such a beautiful, just swooping shot.
Yeah, like crane shot going down onto Norman's hand as he holds his Zippo lighter, and he has to light it 10 times or he's going to lose 10 times in a row, or he's going to lose his finger.
Stan,
What's the superlative, Stan?
It is a hatchet. Okay, here's the list of a block of wood.
Right.
A donut.
That's for me.
That's for Chester.
That's for Chester.
A ball of twine, 3 nails, a club sandwich.
That's mine.
That's
Jennifer Beals. That's a great moment.
she is really great.
She is.
And the little bit that she has in this, she like makes up for her not so interesting performance earlier, but that I remember. But okay, so a club sandwich, a bucket of ice, and a hatchet as sharp as the devil himself.
There it is. So after all this build-up and its beautiful push-in, Norman goes to light his lighter, and it fails on the very first try.
And no pause. Ted takes that pinky off, grabs the money, and just sachets his way out that door.
Without being chased, because that's the deal.
Oh yeah,
he won it fair and square.
Yeah,
but the editing of that moment is so right on.
Because predictably, Norman starts screaming because his pinky's been
and
cut.
everyone in the room starts panicking and rushing to figure out what they need to do.
There is no seam saying that this happened and now this is happening. No, it all is continuous and momentous, and the editing is really great for that.
It is, and you would be forgiven for thinking that with all this setup, there would be a really suspenseful moment of, is he going to be able to do it all 10 times? 1.
I think Tarantino just knew
2,
immediately, no, he's got to fail on the first
3. All right. Nope. Doesn't even light on the
Click.
first try.
Wham! Gone.
Yep. And the strut that Ted does as he leaves the room is... it can't be described. You just need to watch the way that he walks out of this room.
And
it's brilliant.
it is compounded, like, as the credits roll, the 3 guys, because there's a third one. Bruce Willis plays a producer.
Leo, yeah, his producer.
His producer. He's also there. He's the one who really sells Ted on it, partially. And all 3 of them, you hear them in the background as Norman's screaming about his pinky. They're yelling and trying to get things together. Like, what do we do? What do we do? And then as the credits roll, Ted's already gone. As the credits roll, they just basically, in what is a massive Three Stooges bit, just barreled down the hallway trying to get to the elevator.
Now,
all over each other.
So that is the film, and that's the setup for Ted's $1,000 challenge. So let me ask you, gentlemen, if you found yourself in this scenario where somebody was offering you $1,000 to cut off a man's pinky finger if he couldn't light his Zippo 10 times in a row, would you accept?
In this scenario?
Yes.
Is it?
Well, okay, let's start with this scenario.
Yeah.
This specific movie scenario.
This one, the way it's set up, yes. Because it's made clear to me that the guy who's getting his pinky chopped off, they're going to immediately they're drunk, but they have the proper intentions of taking him to the hospital, getting it restitched. That's why they wanted the bucket of ice.
Yeah.
They have and I've also heard that milk apparently helps with that kind of thing.
Weird.
Yeah. But in this situation specifically, yes.
Stan?
It's a very fear factor, hostels, where these people are rich enough to do a bet like this.
Yeah.
And that they've talked about it already, and
you yourself are in no danger. It's the person getting their pinky cut off that's in danger.
It's just the convincibility of.
They've made it clear all you need to do is be the steady hand.
Ethically, if we want to go philosophically, it's that Stan, as the man he is, he wouldn't.
Okay.
I get
that. I do get that.
However long it takes of drinking and snorting the coke.
Snorting the coke.
Oh,
yeah. Tarantino has a prolific coke sniff as part of his performance.
This probably would have been at the height of his addiction time. Because I think, was Mira Sorvino in the picture at that time? She wasn't there yet, I don't think. But
are you cutting off that finger?
But I guess there might be but I would probably give him another chance.
Yeah, see, that's what I've always found hilarious, is that there's no moment. Ted is so fast on the draw to cut off his finger. There's no moment for anyone to be like, oh, okay, all right. Maybe we start counting when he does it successfully once. And then we're off to the races. Nope. Fails on the first drive.
But I understand why, because I mentioned it before we started going.
No payback or no start over.
Yeah. You have to think about, this has been one horrible night for Ted. And I empathizing is like, I've worked some shitty jobs.
Previous he had just talked to his boss about
he's like,
this being the last.
Yeah, you're coming in and covering for me. I'm going home. And she's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do it. But it's just like, just like understanding like what he's been through that night, amongst other things, coven of witches, hostage.
Yeah.
And it probably hasn't been the first time this kind of stuff has happened to him. So like,
forced babysitter to, and it's
horrible children
of a drug kingpin.
Yes, that's one of whom they. This is off topic of The Man from Hollywood, but one of the many things he discovers with those children is that there's a dead a dead sex worker in the mattress of the room that the drug kingpin is staying in with his children. And he gets stabbed in the leg with a needle full of, I'm pretty sure, heroin.
Oh, my God.
So he's on heroin and coke and Cristal.
Well, Ted isn't, no. They don't do any coke on screen.
They make him drink some of the Cristal.
Right.
Yeah, he has some Cristal. They don't do coke.
So he's probably on the
stage.
heroin when this happens. So that probably
he might have had some contact high.
That probably has made him very pliable.
But on top of everything else, is like he's stressed out. All he has to do is drop that stuff off and go, and his night's done. But Chester has basically pulled him in here because he's the guest. He can't really say no to Chester. So he's like, Chester's got him in there, wanting him to be part of their good time. Then they rope him into this. So I see it as like, it's just this moment of satisfaction. He's just like, that's all I have to do? Okay.
Yeah.
So wham, I did my job. Thank you for the money. Out.
And I'm really glad that they didn't turn it into, it's like, you cut off his finger, we're gonna kill you and take our money back. No, it was done fairly, squarely. Yeah. He did his job. He was there for what he was needed for. He did what he needed to do. And there was no pretense in Tarantino's, story that he was going to make this make this even a worse night for Ted. This ends up being a very profitable evening for him.
It really
that's
does.
the biggest tip he's probably ever got.
And that's why when I answered your question, I answered so quickly because it's like filtered through all that. It's like I'd have done it.
Okay, now else I should say yes, I would 100% do this. Any other scenario where you're offered $1,000 to cut off a man's finger if he can't light a Zippo 10 times in a row?
Then I'd have questions because it depends on what the context is. What's the setup? It's like
you don't get any. You don't get an explanation. Here's $1,000 if you cut this man's finger off if he can't light a Zippo.
I was like, and I'm looking at that guy going, does he look like he's in on this? Does it look like this was his part of his choice too? Because that's the thing about Norman. Norman's all. He's high as hell, but he's in on it.
He's in on it.
Yeah, he's in on it.
He literally puts his finger there and is, I'm ready.
He's
ready
to go.
And they do preface a lot of this at the beginning when they first bring Ted in. Chester prefaces, it's like, you're probably wondering why that it's some gay thing where we're going to make you suck our dicks and everything. So it's but he clears that up. It's that this has nothing. It's not sexual in any way or shape or form. But we do have to convince you to do this. So he clears off, that the only reason why you're here and the only thing that you have to do for a second of your time, here's $1,000. And if it doesn't happen, you cut off his finger. So the idea that if there's anything else, I'm sure Ted, if it had something to do with sexually, he probably would have had more trepidation to it.
And on top of that, he still would have gotten 100 just for listening to the pitch.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's a no then from you, dog.
Any other context, and if anything, I'm suspicious of. It's like again, the setup went to great lengths to be like, hey, this is just a bet. We're gonna take care of our friend afterward. It's like, if I don't have any of that sort of context, if it feels even sketchier than that, no, I wouldn't actually.
Stan, would you take this bet under different circumstances?
I guess it depends on, it's like if it's cutting off Jessica.
Oh, you guys are
Jennifer
no fun. I would 100% take this bet under different circumstances.
I don't know if after that they're just going to leave that guy to his own devices and be like, well, you find your way to a hospital, you better get going. It's like,
yeah, I would have to be sure that everybody was cool with
this was basically the equivalent of participating in a high-level Jackass segment.
That's exactly what.
That's the thing.
There was safety parameters.
Yeah.
All around. I mean, even Jennifer Beals' character was there for. It was there as kind of a watcher, observer, make sure everything ended up okay. And if they needed to get to the hospital and they were too drunk, she could have drove them or something like that. It's like, but so the idea that they had been planning this, I think, longer than.
Oh no! That night.
Oh yeah, no.
Because they were talking about the episode.
Yeah, they got to their room.
They were drunk and talking about it, and that's when the bet got made.
But they had planned it.
Well,
they did plan it.
Sort of. I mean, very short term, because they say they got back to their hotel room and turned the TV on, and the episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents was on. So that's where they got the idea that night. Yeah, 100%.
They had a great. Bruce Willis comes in. Leo does his great pitch, producer pitch to Ted to get him into this, and like I said. Chester did his. This is not some weird sexual thing that we're going to make you do to us.
To be fair, I would be extremely apprehensive even up to that point, because it starts with when Ted's rolling up with the stuff from room service. His first taste of whatever is happening in there is two women being thrown out of the room.
Two naked women holding their clothes, running out of the room.
True that, but
Leo spends most of his time.
But is that? Well, I think because Leo is having a fight with his wife
over whether or not he's being faithful.
It's like, did they get thrown out because of that? We never know.
There's no context given for why the two women are leaving naked in the middle of the night.
I would assume since the way Leo is arguing, because he's trying to talk his wife about how he's still being faithful, that I would assume it's Chester and Norman
probably
who had the fun.
And we've talked a lot. This is like 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's a whole Tarantino bit in 20 minutes. So he has to fit in all his kind of weird exposition, all his kind of weird,
all his movie references,
his extended rant about Jerry Lewis,
his extended rant, all his beginning in the diner type,
I will admit,
stories.
Since I'm not a huge fan of Tarantino in general, it was kind of a hard sit through a little bit. It was kind of a hard sell for me to make it all
It takes a minute to get to the point of the short, because he spends like 10 minutes talking about Jerry Lewis in the movie The Bellhop and describing how much he loves Cristal.
And I know you're down with that, Stan. I can tell.
I love that, because that was his reference to his own self and what he does as a writer. And
that's why I asked you, is he parodying himself a little bit?
And we talked about this earlier today. He's either lovingly parodying himself, or it's also possible that he's parodying Oliver Stone, because this would have been not long after Natural Born Killers came out, which he professed to hate. And Oliver Stone is a notorious fan of cocaine. So I wouldn't be surprised if Chester is based a little bit. It might be both. He's based on Oliver Stone,
and it's actually
Tarantino's
one of Tarantino's
reputation.
Of the stuff that he's acted as. It's one of his best performances. And if he is doing a tribute to Oliver Stone, then it's really good.
This is interesting. These two films back to back, both the way that we're reviewing them and the way that they were released, because this is a very different Tarantino than we've seen before in both films.
Yeah.
In Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, he had very minor roles. He was essentially a one-scene wonder in both of them. Here he is essentially like second lead to Ted. He has the majority of the dialogue. He's really the one that drives this portion of the film. So, yeah, I think we are seeing a new Tarantino here, and he actually is pretty good in this as the obnoxious coke-addled director who loses his mind because somebody didn't recork his Cristal.
Oh yeah, oh god,
the temper tantrums in this film.
He calms down, but it's just like there's a moment where you worry that something bad is gonna happen because someone didn't cork it.
Yeah, the temper tantrums. Because there's one by him because somebody didn't recork his Cristal, and then there's one after Leo, Bruce Willis's character.
His wife hangs up on him.
His wife hangs up, and he is stomping around the penthouse, tossing shit and flipping over chairs.
He flips
and
over
tables.
a table full with stuff on it, just like.
Whoosh. That's Leo, right? That's not
that's Leo.
Chester doing that.
No,
the Leo, because there's several temper tantrums.
Yeah. Well, that's what, and so That brings me to my next point, and we talked about it briefly with how good the cinematography is in this film and how good the editing is, specifically in The Man from Hollywood, because it was shot by his... at this point, he already shot 2 films with... we looked it up, and
It was like Andrzej or
Andrzej, I have it still pulled up somewhere. No, I didn't because my internet refreshed. Never mind. His long time at that point... DP.
Yeah.
But the opening of this film is 1 6-minute long take. Then there is a cutaway. Between the first 2, there is no cutaway. It just transitions from Angela's face into the next take, which is 8 minutes long. And then after that, we get like a 2-minute long take, but the rest of it is pretty chopped up. So all these temper tantrums happen in those 2 extremely long takes. So whenever they were filming this, they would have to reset this every single time. And if you fuck something up, great, we're resetting the entire room so that you can stomp around and pour Cristal on the carpet and throw the bottle and flip this table.
I do appreciate thinking about it now. Those were both of those moments were probably red herrings to make you think something worse was going to happen.
Probably. It's also, we were talking about this right before we started recording, Tarantino stuffing having to stuff an entire donut in his mouth.
Yeah, I was telling them about, I think Patton Oswalt on How Did This Get Made, the Ladybugs episode, talks about making food choices in film. Like, for instance, he was eating pancakes in a scene, and he takes a huge old bite. That was either him or Mantzoukas. He's talking about having to do that every take now because it's continuity that he did that. So Tarantino makes a point of taking that donut whole, just stuffing it.
Yeah, doesn't take a bite of it. He shoves the whole donut in his mouth, and then just a few sentences later, he has a line, and then has to chug from the bottle of Cristal.
Yep.
So I wonder how many takes that took for him.
I would say there had been a lot like rehearsal. And
I would think so.
They just blocked it out.
Yeah, because it blocks out like a play, basically.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the segue, because I think if we could ever get the rights to do this would make a wonderful one-act play.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure, however, the rights to a Tarantino script to perform on stage would be astronomically high. But yeah, so that is The Man from Hollywood from the movie 4 Rooms. Do you guys have any more thoughts? It's a 20-minute film, so there's not a whole lot of discussion. Unlike... the novel of notes that I wrote for our From Dusk Till Dawn discussion.
The only thing is, like, we say it's a 20-minute short, but like I was saying, is like with the amount of he didn't cheat himself on editing. He didn't cheat himself on cinematography.
No, there's a swooping crane shot toward the end.
He didn't cheat himself on visual illusion or visual jokes, or he went all out for it. And you do pick up his I'm thinking that Hitchcock's Rope was an influence on the long takes and stuff like that, because he does the cutaway to where people are in shadows doing something over here, and then you got a central character in the bedroom doing something that the camera's actually on, but you still watch the shadows, stuff like that, which is, so the idea that he didn't cheat himself for those 20 minutes, that he still got his monologues and his stories and his references.
His Tarantinoism.
Basically, if you wanted to give someone a good primer on what Tarantino's about, this is a good way to do it.
Yeah, if you enjoy this, you will probably like the works of Tarantino.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't like this, you're not going to like his longer stuff.
You basically would just have to be like, but it's bloodier usually.
Yeah, so if you can find it out there, listeners, I would highly recommend seeking out the latter half of 4 Rooms, The Misbehaviors, and The Man from Hollywood, and just skip the first 2. You really don't need them.
Because it does introduce... it doesn't introduce us, but it does start showing us Robert Rodriguez's maturity as well, and his coming out and his coming into the stuff. So the idea that they're almost back to back in the story. So
thank you for reminding me of that, because I need to look something up real quick before we move into. Okay, yeah. So same year that 1995 was the same year that Desperado came out, Robert Rodriguez's second film after El Mariachi.
I mean, that explains a lot of why they used the people they did, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and this was Four Rooms was the start of a long friendship. Well, probably not the start, but a continuation of friendship between Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino that extends to the movie From Dusk Till Dawn, directed by Robert Rodriguez, written by Tarantino, based on a story by Robert Kurtzman. And
yes, that Robert Kurtzman.
Yes, that Robert Kurtzman. I don't know which other Robert Kurtzman.
The KNB Robert Kurtzman.
Ah. All right, now, Chris, this is normally about the time in the discussion when I would ask, what do you know about this movie? But you actually are pretty familiar with From Dusk Till Dawn, aren't you?
Well, we'll see. The better question is, what do I remember? Because I know I've seen this movie, but it has been years.
Gotcha. Okay, well, what do you think this movie is most famous for?
Most famous for? I don't know. See, I don't know what it's most famous. I mean, I know what the twist is.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay.
That's the twist. It's when most people think of From Dusk Till Dawn, it's not about the vampires, which, spoiler alert, or the sexy dance that Selma Hayek does with the anaconda. This is one of the most famous halfway plot switches in movie history.
Yeah.
The first 45 minutes of this movie are a completely different film from the last 45. So a brief overview of the plot. George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino play the Gecko brothers.
Yeah, brothers, yeah.
Seth and Richie, who are outlaws.
They've just robbed a bank, right?
Well, Seth has just been broken out of custody by Richie, and now they're on the run trying to get to Mexico. And
they've killed a few rangers and cops.
They've killed.
Tarantino's character is injured, isn't he?
Yeah, he gets shot through the hand.
Got it. Okay.
And one of my favorite shots, because it's pretty bad CG now, but it's a pretty fun shot. The opening of this movie is like if you took any of his famous diner scene openings and put them in a shitty gas station / liquor store out in the middle of the desert. In Texas. But they get into an altercation with the liquor store owner and a U.S. Ranger. Texas Ranger. Thank you, Jesus. Walker, Texas Ranger. They get into an altercation where they kill this ranger, and then the liquor store owner starts shooting at them and shoots Richie through the hand. But in order for them to get to Mexico, to follow through on this plan that Seth has set up with one of their contacts in Mexico, they take a family hostage. The head of this family, played by the inimitable Harvey Keitel.
And he's really great.
He is, as a former pastor, along with his two kids, played by Ernest Liu and...
in his first movie.
Yep. And, oh my God, Juliette Lewis. We were just talking about her last Tarantino episode. You may remember her from Natural Born Killers. But they are driving their RV cross country, and so Richie and Seth take them hostage so that they can drive them into Mexico, where they are supposed to meet Seth's contact at a bar called the Titty Twister.
Yep.
And it's there that they discover that the bar is full of vampires.
It is a vampire den in its entirety.
And then the rest of the movie is a vampire movie.
Yep.
As people have pointed out, that the first 45 minutes you're watching a Quentin Tarantino movie, and the last 45 minutes you're watching a Robert Rodriguez movie. It's insane. I think it was supposed to have been a much bigger twist than it was, and probably now, for people who don't already know, going into this movie cold, I'm sure is an enormous twist. That these are two basically completely different films. But from what I understand, the advertising ruined the twist back in the day. That, by the way, vampires.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in line with James Cameron and the Terminator 2 trailer, which straight up spoiled this is a good Terminator.
Yeah. So there's the brief overview of the plot for you. And one of the most famous halfway plot switches. And going along with the halfway plot switch of it all, I want to talk briefly about how unconventional this story is, because you have two straight up villain protagonists in Seth and Richie. Seth is only marginally less villainous than Richie by virtue of the fact that he is not a rapist and is slightly more reluctant to kill than Richie is. Richie, Tarantino's character, is a confirmed rapist and unrepentant murderer.
Basically an amoral bastard.
Yeah, and these are the...
But it's never his fault.
I'm sorry.
It's
never whose fault.
It's never Richie's fault.
As far as Richie's concerned.
As far as Richie's is concerned.
Yeah, Richie always has an excuse for why he rapes and murders. Seth has no problem taking this family hostage and threatening to murder them if they don't get him and Richie across the border. But he's the hero.
He's honorable. He makes honorable promises, and it's like he will keep his promise if he makes a promise and they're able to get out. It's like he is the honorable thief in that sense. Where Richie has no pretense.
Right. And we've also got Harvey Keitel's character, who is a former pastor who has lost his faith in God. You would think that him refinding his faith would be a much larger part of the story, and he would gradually take the role of protagonist. But again, spoiler alert for a 24-year-old movie, he dies pretty horrifically.
But he is heroic.
He is heroic, but in this sort of film with this sort of story that Rodriguez and Tarantino are telling, you'd think that, all right, we've got the marginally less evil Seth. We've put him on this path towards possibly redeeming himself. Maybe, his heroic actions, he dies valiantly saving them. No,
but he
makes it out.
He says it. I might be.
We're going to talk about it. It's one of my favorite lines in the movie. I might be a bastard, but I'm not a fucking bastard.
And because he lets Juliette Lewis's character, he says, "Go home, Kate, go home,"
and which is arguably one of his few heroic actions in the movie. And
I don't know though
this is a podcast. No one can see the hand motions that you're making currently,
and I envy them.
And the undulating steak that he makes.
Yeah, which I've never understood the principle of. Why does it need to be pneumatic?
Because it'll piston the steak into their hearts faster.
Yeah, but at the same time, he is also using the hand motions of ramming it into their body.
I'm pretty sure it looked like the mechanics of the prop failed.
Maybe.
Probably. We're getting way ahead of ourselves.
The idea
here,
I can see in my head is you ram it into their chest and then the pneumatic part keeps hitting them with the steak.
There's so many questions, so many problems with the design.
And this is one of K&B's earliest things, right?
Yeah. But I'm just saying, I think Tarantino made so many odd choices in this one that worked out well. Ultimately, it's part of what makes the film so memorable. But I think out of everything, okay, you can see, especially once he's bitten, Harvey Keitel's character dying before the end. I don't think anyone saw his 16-year-old son dying in such a horrific fashion.
But again, heroic though.
Sure, ish. We'll talk about that too in a little bit. How insane that death is. I just think they were such odd choices, but ultimately they worked out so well. Especially from what I was reading, everyone was like, all five of them were supposed to make it out in the end, and not just Kate. And Seth, Juliette Lewis's character, Kate and Seth.
So whose decision would have been
that kind of makes sense to me, though, to think like those guys, considering they're the with Juliette Lewis the better people in that group fighting to survive, and if anyone's gonna make a choice to sacrifice themselves to make sure everyone else can get away, it's gonna be at least those two.
Yeah. Going back to your question of whose decision was it? It was Tarantino's, because apparently the stakes weren't high enough. So he wanted to change it up and do something less conventional.
I like that middle ground because I like the idea that there was a potential for them to all survive, but sacrifices had to be made.
Yeah.
Which I find to be a better middle ground than George R.R. Martin's Anyone Can Go, which is fairly true. But when you're telling a story,
right? See also Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
See also J.K. Rowling.
Yeah. When you're telling a story,
see also Stephen King.
Yeah, and I understand it.
There's the kids.
Yeah.
I understand that. I also understand. I want them to live.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna take a break away from our the way we've got the show notes done to just talk about, since we brought it up, and I don't want to forget about it. Scott. Yeah, Jacob's son Scott. His death is one horrifically gruesome and painful to watch, because first he has to try to kill his own father after Jacob, Harvey Keitel's character, turns into a vampire. He has to try, and he fails. And then he gets attacked by a whole bunch of vampires who are tearing him apart, biting his arms and his legs and his neck and torso. And he is begging his sister Kate to kill him. And finally she brings herself to do it, and she shoots him in the chest. At which point Scott and all the vampires attacking him all explode. It doesn't matter how many times I have seen this movie, I never fail to go, what the fuck, at that moment.
Because she used the gun. She used the gun that her father. Bullets. He cut the cross. He cut the cross into the bullets. So because whenever he would shoot, or they would explode because those bullets were blessed.
And since they were drinking his blood at the time.
Exactly.
Okay. I guess I can buy that. It's always just blown my mind that he gets shot and then him and all the vampires explode.
Because he would be turning at that point.
Yeah. The deaths and the gore in this movie are insane. It has got some of the most original deaths.
It's Tom Savini.
Yeah, some great effects. I mean, God. Anyway, I had to take that quick divergence just to talk about, because I was watching it again last night and I was like, what a weird fucking death for this poor kid.
Yeah, but he it was kind of built up because, he was going to be the one to alert the police, the border patrol that they were there. So there was build up to where he was going to have a.
So what you're saying is he deserved to die because he's a rat?
No. I'm saying that
snitches get stitches.
No, that there was an animosity between him and his sister. So it's like he dug his sister. It's like there was going to be a build up for him to be having a heroic moment.
No, I agree. I think you're right. He was a rat.
And
he had it coming.
No. That he wasn't.
I'm sorry, I just channeled David Two Dogs Hayes for a second.
It wasn't that he was
healed it up pretty good.
Completely, I'm sure he was frightened, but when he was he was begging for his sister, but knowing that he was going to turn and that he was doing the same request that his father had.
Yeah, he was the most reluctant one to tell Jacob that if Jacob turned, he would kill him. Seth, of course, was the first one to be like, yeah, I don't give a fuck. If you turn into a vampire, I'll kill you. And then Kate said, yeah, if you turn, I will kill you. Scott was the one that was hesitant, and that's what gets him killed. Still, what a way to go. All right, so I want to move into talking about the Tarantino connections between films, because this gives us a lot of good ones. First of all, it gives us Sheriff Earl McGraw, played by Michael Parks. May he rest in peace. Not the only time that we see this particular character. Despite the fact that he dies in the one scene that he's in, we then see him again in Kill Bill Volume 2 and in Planet Terror.
So both of those are before From Dusk Till Dawn?
Yeah.
They would have to take place before.
Yeah, so apparently From Dusk Till Dawn takes place in the future of all these other films, way ahead of them. Because, yeah, he comes back. We see him again in one scene in Kill Bill Volume 2. And then he's pretty present, heavily present throughout Planet Terror.
He is.
Which is, again, Robert Rodriguez's half of Grindhouse. The bag of burgers that Seth brings back to the hotel room for him and Richie and their poor, unfortunate, already dead hostage come from Big Kahuna Burger.
Big Kahuna.
As we saw in Pulp Fiction.
Yep.
And then, so another one that I noticed that I thought was interesting in that it's not directly related to the Tarantino verse as a whole, but a callback to Desperado. The beer that they drink at several points throughout the movie is Chango, which is what Tarantino's character was drinking in the bar in Desperado. So some callbacks across different universes, which is always fun. And maybe,
but is Rodriguez universe Tarantino's universe?
Actually, yeah, no, we did just say that. I guess Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino's universes are part of a much larger one.
That's what I was wondering if they shared.
Either that or From Dusk Till Dawn could be just the strange kind of crossing point between them.
Yeah,
in a weird, like,
because I'm not sure
sense.
about like Spy Kids and stuff would be in the Tarantino verse, but definitely.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, but they're canon to Machete.
They are. That's right. So it is, right?
Sadly,
because Danny Trejo's character is Machete.
That's right.
What do you mean, sadly?
I have full disclosure. I've never seen a single Spy Kid.
Oh, they're wild. They're fucking wild.
Well, in addition to the connections to the other films, I noticed a couple specifically, and I found this interesting, a couple of callbacks to Reservoir Dogs. Because after Seth gets back to the room with the big kahuna burgers and he finds out that while he was gone, Richie murdered their hostage, Richie starts trying to justify why he did it, and he tells Seth, after you left, she became a completely different person.
Right.
Which is what Mr. Orange tried to use to excuse killing Mr. Blonde. He tells nice guy Eddie, after you left, he started acting like a completely different person. I caught that last night and I thought it was very interesting. And we also get a frequent Tarantino-ism that has become one of my favorites. All right, Ramblers, let's get ramblin'. And all of its variations, including, all right, hard drinkers, let's drink hard. And all right, vampire killers, let's kill vampires. I love any occasion where I get to use, all right, X, let's X.
That is pretty funny. I was just kind of lost in thought for a second about the line reuse from Reservoir Dogs. Mm-hmm. It sounds to me like that was his way of signifying this character was fucking lying.
Well, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty blatant. It's just like, it's just a nice way of saying, oh, hey, no, this guy's lying.
Yeah.
Or his perception of reality.
Yeah.
Well, I guess in the case of Mr. Orange, it was a complete lie. But in Richie's case, his perception of reality.
You can't trust what he's saying.
Yeah, no. Richie is an extremely deranged individual in this film, because just feeding more into what we were talking about, how the first half and the second half are so completely different. All the vampire stuff is very over the top and cartoonish. Mm-hmm. All of the Seth and Richie stuff is extremely dark because it's not outright stated, but it doesn't really have to be. Richie didn't just murder their hostage. He also probably raped her. Mm-hmm. And this is conveyed to us through a series of extremely quick, almost subliminal cuts where Seth is looking into the bedroom in their hotel room where she was, and all you can see is like splatters of blood all over the room. It's extremely dark and brutal. Mm-hmm. Going from that to flipping a table over so that you can body slam vampires down onto it to kill them is just such a weird juxtaposition.
Done by Fred Williamson.
Oh yeah, we're going to get to that. So real quick, I just made a quick note here. Still a pretty racist movie, just not in the sense that the other ones have been. There's a lot of slurs used against Hispanics in this movie, but no uses of the N-word. So he just sort of traded one for the other.
That's because that was the Robert Rodriguez part. So,
well, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that opens up a whole different can of worms.
Considering they are in Mexico at that point, right?
Yeah.
I think that's why. I mean,
yeah. There's also the moment where when Seth is in their hotel room with Jacob and Kate and Scott, where he talks about again another fantastic line, because in the film Scott, played by Ernest Liu, is Chinese, and Seth has this line where he says to Jacob, "You don't look Japanese," and Jacob says, "Well, neither does he, because he's Chinese." So lots of just weird casual racism throughout. Some of the stuff that he says is pretty overtly. Like at one point when they're at the bar, he calls Danny Trejo's character Jose. There's just little shit like that sprinkled throughout the movie.
But then you have because you have Harvey Keitel responding in the affirmative. It's like clearing up the mistake. So it's like, okay. Again, it's another example where the racism isn't in the good people's mouths.
I think the racism is just a punctuation to the fact that these are not good people.
Right. It
always is.
And once again, this is our nominal protagonist, the only slightly less evil Seth.
It's the point of making like the point of like, this is not the hero, this is the protagonist.
Right.
This is the main character, and main characters don't have to be heroes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it does, but and also you have Danny Trejo and Robert Rodriguez and Fred Williamson being, and again, like Chris said, that it's in the Robert Rodriguez section. So it's like how much
of it was Tarantino and how much of it was Rodriguez,
and how much discussion was made. It's like, okay, am I crossing a line here, or are we still good with the language placement? And it's like, I'm probably going out on a limb here, but it's like, okay, Rodriguez had to be part of this.
Well, yeah, we've talked about this before with like Samuel L. Jackson before. Like, why hasn't any one of the black actors that Tarantino has worked with ever come up to him and been like, "Hey, maybe you should cool it"?
Probably
with that.
Because they've experienced it enough in their lives.
Yeah,
and that's the thing with the slurs against Hispanics and Latin American people. It's like, I'm sure Rodriguez has encountered that, and the people
heard it enough times.
Yeah, it's like there's been plenty of times where people, probably a lot of white people, have just casually tossed off those epithets.
And there is payback.
Oh yeah,
there is payback.
But that's the other thing, isn't it? It's like there's that
comeuppance is available.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna move on from that.
Yeah.
Like how we danced around all those words.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to point. The entire point of that brief discussion was I just thought it was fascinating that it was the film still managed to be slightly racist, just not in the way that Tarantino's films normally are.
But it is a running theme in Tarantino's films of a casual racism.
Yeah, it just continues to play into that. Now we already talked about this one a little bit, so we won't linger on it for too long. But Stan, do any lines stick out to you that you still use in real life? Because like I said, I love the all right blank, let's blank, but I'm also a big fan of I might be a blank, but I'm not a fucking blank.
Right. I guess from the first time I've seen this movie, Cheech Marin is like a focal point. It's like when I hear about From Dusk Till Dawn, that's the first thing I go to is Cheech's opening of
the titty twister monologue.
I
feel like repeating any part of that monologue is automatically going to give this podcast a completely different rating. Like explicit isn't going to be hard enough.
It just sets up everything about what the bar they're going into is. So it's like that's there all the time. So it's like whenever I hear a list of description, a listing description, that's where your head goes. That's where my head goes, and it's like I hear the rhythm, and he every time he says it, it's different, So he never says that word the same. Ever. And listeners, if you've seen this movie, you know exactly what we're talking about. If you haven't, you'll know when if you decide to watch it, you'll know when you get there. It's Cheech Marin with one of the world's most vulgar monologues, hamming it up to the point where he ends the monologue by looking directly into the camera. I think it's the only time in any one of Tarantino's films that anyone directly breaks. No, not because The Bride does it in Kill Bill. Yeah. But it is definitely, that's actually a Cheech and Chong joke. Oh, okay. Too, it's like to break the fourth wall. To break the fourth wall, and the fact that that line, the fuck it, is a Cheech and Chong. You said that joke line less like Cheech Marin in the film and more like Nicolas Cage in anything ever. That sounded like Stan doing a. It's Stan doing Nicolas Cage doing Cheech Marin.
You should teach master's classes. Chris, you look like you've had something to say.
Well,
I'm
I was
sorry.
just going to mention Jennifer Beals kind of looks down the barrel of the camera.
Oh, that's right. She does.
Well, she's meant to be. Ostensibly she's meant to be looking at the person who just walked away from her, but she's basically looking at the camera.
Yeah, that's the first cut actually in that segment of Four Rooms. That's a good point. And yeah, there's a opening of Kill Bill Volume 2 where
it's kind of like I feel like sometimes it feels like he's kind of like a Looney Tunes just bit that he's sticking in there, because occasionally, like in some of those cartoons like Bugs Bunny, when a situation is getting too ridiculous or like someone's threatening to kill him, he just kind of, it just cuts to him, he's just looking at looking at the person yelling at him, he just gives a quick to the camar, look to the camera and just looks back. Yeah
the old Jim Halpert. So
yeah,
the last one that I've got as an actual discussion topic for this one, as I always say, this could take 5 minutes or it could be the next 30. At what point is a cameo no longer a cameo? Because I feel like it'd be easier to list off the people who didn't cameo in this film rather than list the people who did. And the people who weren't cameos were all the extras and the stunt people. Because in addition to our main cast of George Clooney, Quentin Tarantino, Harvey Keitel, Ernest Liu, and Juliette Lewis, we also have John Saxon, Tom Savini, Selma Hayek, Cheech Marin playing 3 different characters in 3 different scenes, Danny Trejo, Fred Williamson, and Greg Nicotero. All there in various degrees of time.
I would probably say Saxon's is the most cameo of the
It
cameos,
is.
because it's just him as a cop as a detective on a news report on TV.
Yeah.
And we never see him again.
Well, we also get John Travolta's wife, Kelly Preston, as the news reporter in that same scene.
She's the news reporter. Okay, so she's
the reporter. John Saxon is the sheriff.
So she has the her and John Saxon would have the cameos, because I think everybody else are more special guest stars.
That or supporting cast.
Or supporting cast,
Yeah.
because they end up having central moments in the piece. It's like they're not just there for a moment. They end up being integral to the plot. Especially at Fred Williamson and Tom Savini. That's
those
my
two
thing.
less so, but still, like, for those two legends to pop up in the film for as brief of a time as they do, because you're introduced to them when they get to the titty twister, and then once shit hits the fan, they're not around for much longer. These two guys maybe have 15 minutes total of screen time.
That's
probably
Robert
more
Duvall.
like 10. But yeah, I didn't realize this until I was looking at the cast list, because I didn't recognize him all the way back in 1996. Visual effects legend Greg Nicotero is the guy that Sex Machine, Tom Savini's character, steals a beer from.
See, I was wondering where Nicotero... So that would be definitely a cameo.
Yeah.
And like I was saying, K&B was, starting at that time, hence, Kurtzman's involvement and Nicotero's involvement, and they did the special effects, and Tom Savini helped them. But I think Tom Savini was there mainly as Sex Machine and didn't really worry about him. He might have done some overlooking of special effects or stuff, but he wasn't. It was K&B's stuff.
Yeah.
And but this was what made it more than just a cameo for me, was the introduction that Tom Savini's character has with Juliette Lewis's character. It's like,
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm Sex Machine.
Nice to meet you. And then he goes on to be a very central moment after that.
See, I thought you were going to talk about his introduction with the crotch gun.
That would make it a cameo.
Do you remember this, Chris?
Oh no.
The first time, so in Greg Nicotero's brief cameo, Sex Machine steals his beer. Nicotero turns around and pulls a knife on him, and Sex Machine responds by leaning back, at which point a secret compartment pops off of the crotch of his pants, and a small 6-shooter pops up.
Don't bring a knife to a cock gun fight.
Yeah, whatever Stan just said that I wonder if the audience could actually hear because he's not talking into the microphone.
Oh, they probably heard it.
Yeah, crotch gun. Same movie as the first half. The reason I brought it up, at what point is a cameo not really a cameo
Now
anymore?
all I can think about is what circumstances led to the invention and application of the crotch gun.
And how much use does he find himself getting out of it? But so
I think he had one shot.
The balls of the crotch gun are small, like 380 cylinders. How do you reload it? I don't know. How does he shoot
thrust.
it? I don't know. But
Thrust.
anyway, like
I'm
was
pretty
saying,
sure my answer is the same to both of those questions. Thrust.
yeah. So the reason I brought up when is a cameo not a cameo, it also harkens back to my original point about unconventional storytelling. One would think that if you've got all of these people present, you've got Danny Trejo turning into a vampire, Cheech Marin turns into a vampire, Salma Hayek is like the queen of the vampires, Fred Williamson and Tom Savini both turn into them. You'd expect these big names, like these cult stars, to be the threat. In any other movie, it'd be like, all right, these are your main cadre of vampires. These are the ones that your good guys are going to fight. Once they all turn, they get taken out pretty quickly. And then for the rest of the movie, Seth and company find themselves fighting like generic faceless vampires. And it's always just seems so interesting to me that you get these big name stars to turn them into vampires to kill them off pretty quickly.
I think I understand why. It makes sense to me, at least, that you would want them gone pretty quick because you want the focus to be on your survivors and getting out.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, to me.
Well, then the special guest stars were at Titty Twister by accident. They weren't there as vampires, except for the people that worked there. We didn't mention the band. That would be the cameo, I guess, in that group.
Yeah, because that was Robert Rodriguez's band.
Oh, was it? Okay, all right.
I'm pretty sure that's what I read.
And
he's definitely, at one point, you can see Robert Rodriguez up on stage playing with them.
Okay. That explains a lot. But so the workers at Titty Twister are the vampires that have been robbing bikers and truckers. That's why they didn't want Seth and
company
to be there, friends. Because you have to be a truck driver because we're going to eat you and steal all your stuff. And if you're just civilians, then but the minister convinces, it's like, I have a class too. It's like, okay, I guess we're gonna fuck you up.
That's the whole reason that Seth and company get into the bar and they avoid their initial fight is because of a technicality.
Right.
Because in order to drive his RV, Jacob had to get a Class 2 license, which technically makes him a trucker.
Yep.
We didn't talk about the fact that this entire plot probably could have been avoided had Richie not chosen to attack Cheech Marin's character as they were coming in, because this is a bar for truckers and bikers. Marin's character, I don't know if he had a name other than Titty Twister Barker.
Well, he's Carlos.
TTB.
When he comes at the end, he's
his first cameo is at the border when they stop. He's a border patrol officer, and his third cameo is as Carlos, Seth's Mexico contact. The second role is the Titty Twister Barker, and he tries to stop them from going inside, and Seth and Richie both respond by beating the shit out of him and breaking his hand, and Richie literally kicks him while he's down. Had they not done this, I doubt that all the vampires coming out and murdering the entire bar full of patrons, I don't think that happens every night. Otherwise, how would you get repeat business? Now, clearly it does happen pretty often.
That's what they do. They rob.
Yeah, they rob trucks. At the end of the film, in fact, you see that the bar is located on top of a giant buried pyramid surrounded by an Aztec pyramid, and surrounded by old 18-wheelers and shit. And in fact, that's how they get their weapons, their improvised weapons for the final showdown. But had the two of them not done this, or if they had just left when they were told this is a bar for bikers and truckers, the entire plot of the movie could have been avoided.
Well, it's like you had asked during True Romance, they could have dodged a lot of stuff had they been a little bit more, let some things go, a little bit smarter. It's like, if Richie wasn't
had
psychotic,
Clarence not left his goddamn driver's license in the home of the drug dealer he just killed.
Exactly. But if Richie wasn't psychotic and had misinterpretations of reality as it truly was at the time, they probably would have got a lot of, they wouldn't have killed the hostage, so they could have gotten away a long time ago.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been so obsessed with getting in Kate's pants, and completing the task that she put him on, which is my favorite scene in the movie when they're in the back of
her reaction. But hold on, Chris, you look like you've been trying to say something.
Oh, no. I was just thinking about how wonderfully low stakes the vampire's goals are.
Right.
And because any other vampire sort of movie, it's all about how they lurk in the shadows and they might secretly rule a lot of things and they're very powerful and they've been around for ages and ages. And here it's just like they have a bar and they have a mid-sized crime ring,
and they steal shit from truck drivers.
They steal shit from truck drivers. That's all they want to do.
Among the other petty shit that you see. That these people have stolen from the truck drivers. Like, there's an entire wooden crate full of squirt guns.
Yeah.
And they murdered a truck driver and stole his inventory to get that. But yeah, Stan, I also love the scene in the RV. Is that the one you're thinking of between Richie and Kate?
I'll do what you...
Yeah, so the first time when Seth and Richie take this family hostage, Richie has this weird hallucination of Kate, again played by Juliette Lewis, in the middle of this very tense showdown, like a negotiation between Seth and Jacob. Richie full on hallucinates Kate turning around and saying, "Richie, would you eat my pussy for me?"
Oh, yeah.
And Seth has to get him out of his hallucination. So later when they're in the RV...
Oh, so he has full on psychotic delusions.
Yeah.
So later, when they're all in the RV...
So that's what he means when he says when the hostage is killed, she turns into a completely different person. He was full on just hallucinating what she was saying.
Yeah. So the scene that Stan is talking about is they're on the RV and Richie is trying to be as smooth as I guess Richie is capable of being by like, if you want, I can do that for you. And she's like, What? That thing you asked me back in the room. What did I ask you? And it leads to this.
This sounds like Charlie from It's Always Sunny trying to seduce a woman.
It kind of is, and it leads to one of the best physical comedy moments in the movie. And now that I'm thinking about it, one of the only physical comedy moments in the movie, because Seth has to call back from the front of the RV to shut Richie down. To keep anything else worse from happening. And Richie looks at Kate and he's like, "We'll talk later." And she just gives him this look and she half smiles and nods like, "Okay." And just the look on Juliette Lewis's face is pure comedic.
She
genius.
is, along with Harvey Keitel. Well, actually the whole family, even Ernest Liu in his first movie, I guess because it's introducing, I don't know if what he's done since or what he did before, but it's a great casting for that family.
Yeah.
And all three of them do so well and portray this portion of the plot so well and all three of them are super important to the resolutions of things. And Juliette Lewis it's like she had just done Natural Born Killers, but the fact that she had done it was like a continuation of her performance in Cape Fear. I would say that
a little bit, yeah.
From Dusk Till Dawn is probably her most wholesome role that she's ever played. Because she's... no, What's Eating Gilbert Grape probably.
Excuse you, I think you are forgetting the classic National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Well, she was kind of a dirty girl in that.
No, she was a typical teenage girl.
And also, wasn't she 14 in Christmas Vacation?
Something
14 or 15?
Right, yeah. And she was supposed to be All-American Girl, but...
Let's move on.
But in the sense that... she was real that casting of that family, but Harvey Keitel brilliant. And but yeah, that moment in the back of the RV, both Juliette Lewis and Quentin Tarantino. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, he's good.
He's really good.
Yeah, to be a murderous psychopath in the movie.
And that's why I'm saying this is the period where we're seeing where he was doing his stuff in order to show that the hybridness things that he was doing, the hybrid stuff that he was doing could work. And so his performances played through that. And even if he was totally stoned on cocaine the whole time at this period of time, it was okay because he was delivering a lot of stuff to show that what he was doing, what he was presenting to the world was workable.
Yeah.
And what Robert Rodriguez was presenting to the world was that we can go back and reintroduce the grindhouse type of stuff, So, because this would have been the first grindhouse film that the two of them did. The two of them, that started that process, I think.
So, for our last little bit of discussion here, I decided to go to the quotes page on IMDb because I didn't want to fuck up this quote that I'm going to say in a minute. But it turns out that Cheech Marin's Chitty Twister Barker character does have a credited name in the script, and it's Chet Pussy.
Chet Pussy.
C-H-E-T. Chet Pussy.
And there is a reason why he would be Chet Pussy.
Yeah. So the last thing that I want to talk about in this movie full of overblown insanity, all the big things, especially in the second half. And Chris, if you remember any of them, I know it's been a while since you've seen it, but chime in.
Oh, I don't.
For me, it's some of the best moments in the film are the little things. Mm-hmm. And specifically, there's a moment where you see the shift in Harvey Keitel's character, Jacob. It's after everything's gone to hell in the Titty Twister, and they're trying to convince Jacob, as a former man of God, to try to refine his faith because, as Seth puts it, as a man of God, he is their best weapon against these vampires. And so Seth asks him, "So what are you, Jacob? A faithless preacher or a mean motherfucking servant of God?" Now, prior to this point, Jacob has sworn and said fuck and several other curses several times throughout the movie. He's had no problem. But when Seth asks him, "What are you, a faithless preacher or a mean motherfucking servant of God?" Jacob looks at him and says, he takes a pause and he goes,
takes his glasses off
and he goes, "I'm a mean servant of God." And I just think that's so brilliant and so well done because that is really the shift. Yeah. He, at that point, he will not say motherfucking servant of God. Despite having had no problems prior to that, that is the moment where it's like, okay,
because
now
previous
he's back
to that,
on the
it
track.
had no connection to his faith.
You're right.
Yeah.
What he's showing is he's if he's going to be a servant of God again, he's got to comport himself better.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's earned because previous to that, when they first get to the Twister and Seth is really angry and and he just beat up Chet Pussy. And his
name should have been Chase.
Chase, that's a great name.
I'm sorry, I broke Stan.
But Jacob has that whole, "Are you such a fucking loser that you don't
yes, thank you.
See that you've won?
Yes.
That you've gone through all this."
Yeah.
And it's totally earned to where Seth is able to basically do the same thing for Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob talks him off the ledge.
Yep.
Like this man of faith who's lost his faith talks down this hardened criminal like off the ledge there, and it's brilliant. We could just spend an entire segment talking about the lines that Tarantino wrote. It's some of his most comedic writing. Guys, the longer this podcast goes on, the less good I am with words, apparently. I'm starting to struggle. But I love the where are we going? Mexico. What's in Mexico? Mexicans. It's just all kinds of shit like that. And as I scroll through the quotes
and then
page,
you brought it up earlier, the whole when they first meet Seth and Richie and they do the whole, it's like, "What are you guys? Are you fags or something?" And then he's like, "No, this is my son." He said, "What? You don't look Chinese or you don't look Japanese." He said, "Neither does he." You brought that up that all this again, in sort of a compact version of Tarantino stuff. He's still able. You're still seeing the growth of his use of words and his combinations of phrases and the building of his universe and just through. So even though that it's not just his movie, Robert Rodriguez was like, "How? Yes, you're a great writer. I'm a great editor, and I can put set pieces together because the set pieces are Rodriguez's. The explosions, the monster sets. But so the combination of the two just like totally exploited both of their strengths at that time, and since then both of them have grown exponentially. Of course, Troublemaker is now one of the most respected effects studios in the world, and editing houses in the world. So it's like,
despite the fact that Rodriguez is not as prolific as he was for a while there, which is a shame because I really thought Sin City would have been more of a push for him. But or even Grindhouse would have been more of a push. But I think we haven't seen much other than like the Machete movies and Spy Kids films since then.
Yeah. Well,
I promise I'm not just going to spend the rest of the episode.
And then when they team back up for the Grindhouse.
Well, yeah, that was in 2007.
That.
Yeah,
you said that. So.
I promise I'm not just going to spend the rest of the episode reading quotes. But
he's gonna.
It's okay.
Another one of my favorites when Carlos and Seth, when Seth and Kate escape the titty twister and they meet Carlos outside, Carlos says about the vampires, "What, were they psychos?" To which Seth responds, "Do they look like psychos? Is that what they look like? They were vampires. Psychos do not explode when sunlight hits them. I don't give a fuck how crazy they are."
Exactly. And
well, Seth would know.
The whole vampire thing, because there's a whole sequence that he didn't need to include, but the whole sequence of how believable vampires are. It's like, I don't believe in vampires, but what I just saw, and then he asks Jacob, and Jacob's like, "I don't believe in vampires, but I
believe in what I saw."
What I saw, and he does the glasses thing. And
is that why you do that? Is that where you got that from? Whenever you take your glasses off and clean them while we're trying to have a conversation with you,
Harvey Keitel with glasses is, along with Juliette Lewis and smoking, Harvey Keitel and
it's their favorite prop
and his
work.
Glasses are some of the best prop work in movies, I believe, because whenever he has something around his face or something that he can hold on to, Harvey Keitel has this really interesting, and it's gone back all the way to Mean Streets, because he'll hold something and he'll talk to it or talk through it, and and it's like he's able to transfer, and so he does that a lot. And
he has that natural second nature of someone who's not just wielding as a prop. He's using them like someone who uses them.
It's an appendage.
Yeah,
it's an appendage, and it's something that he uses to accentuate the meaning, even though he's only going to say two words. Whatever prop he has,
he's natural. He's not one of those people who's like, "I don't know what to do with this," or my hands.
That's me, 100%. Whether I'm on camera or on stage.
That's me.
What do I do with my hands?
That's me in real life.
Pockets, okay.
Thank God for pockets. Yes,
that's what prop actors are. It's like, okay, it's like, I know I got to do something with my hands, so it's like I need to do something physically with a prop that will turn the prop into a character and an extension of my hands or my body of some sort, and that's what props. That's the real meaning behind props, is that it gives actors a reason to do shit with their bodies, and that prop becomes an appendage. It's true.
I want to see. I want to see your review on RateMyProfessor.com.
I'm glad we learned the real meaning of propness.
But the idea that and Juliette Lewis does the same thing with cigarettes, and then her feet.
It could be argued that every actor does that with a prop,
but arguably not as well. A lot of actors are not very specific with their props. They give it a general reason, like the coffee cup with nothing in it, it's just a general thing to be there, but you got to you got to give it life. You got to give it a being.
Shout out to my wife, Katie Bearden, who's been a guest on this show several times, because there is never an empty coffee cup in a TV show or in a movie that she does not immediately notice. And she will call it out because it's usually so blatant. I know this is an audio medium, but like if you ever watch somebody handle an actual cup of coffee and how delicate they are with it versus how somebody in a movie with an empty cup is just not playing the weight of what they're holding.
Yeah, they're not paying attention to the fact that it's supposed to have one weight and two liquid physics. So like if you wave a coffee cup around, you have to be cognizant of the fact that like, oh shit, there goes coffee out the cup.
See every single scene in Central Perk and Friends.
Yeah.
But again, we go back to, they probably actually had real coffee in it at the first take, but after, 16 takes of breaking, they probably ended up just using the last take with the empty cup. So
when they were near heart attacks and they were taking the coffee shits every other take.
Exactly.
Well, no, that's their fault, and they should have to drink the cold coffee as punishment.
I agree, but I'm just saying, they probably ran out of the cold coffee.
No, I'd have some on standby.
Because some of those takes, they could not, they had a live audience, so they couldn't get through those scenes all the time. Same with like Seinfeld and stuff. So like, scenes in the diner in Seinfeld, they would have to do the eating.
George
over
Costanza
and over again,
would have to eat 17 eggs.
And it would get bad. So it's like, you get them to the point where I don't have any more film in the camera.
If anything, on Seinfeld, that would work to their favor of being more miserable in the scene.
Yeah.
So I'm giving them that leeway that they used to take.
I mean, I get it, but
take that work
to,
was the empty cup, and it was bad.
But part of their
they forgot to mime.
I get it, but again, part of their acting is supposed to be, they're supposed to remember there's water or something in this cup.
Agreed. Because this is why I don't hate mimes. Yeah. And we saw this in Detective Pikachu with
what a weird segue that was. I don't hate mimes.
But you do.
I don't hate mimes.
But
I hate miming.
But the idea that
I've seen some really talented mime acts where they simulate the weight and everything.
That is the foundation of everything has weight, even if it's not really there.
And I've had a minimum of mime training for stage. I personally hate it, and it's entirely because of how many auditions I have been on where I'm asked to mime something, and it's. This conversation has gone way the hell off the rails.
Well, hold on.
It's got theoretical.
I'm going to scoot it a little bit further off the rails. It's actually going to...
but I brought up Detective Pikachu.
Yeah, well, I'm going to bring up something even weirder, because one of my favorite examples, and it happened in the same instance of someone who's properly miming weight and someone who's not, happened in a wrestling match. It was Sting versus Abyss in TNA. I can't remember the exact event it happened at, but they were in what their version of it was a graveyard match where they were fighting, and one of the props they had was headstones, and Abyss was actually pretending like they were actually heavy and hoisting them up and tossing them around like they were actual proper headstones, and Sting in the same match would just grab one and just yank it up.
Now, see, in the complete opposite direction of the empty coffee cup thing, I have worked with a director before in a stage production who insisted that every brown paper bag used in a picnic scene had a fresh sandwich in it every single night. The amount of money that was wasted on bread and lunch meat so that the poor stagehands could make sandwiches to put them in these brown paper bags that are never opened and the props are never taken out of. It is just absurd to me.
I'd have just left the paper bag at the prop table with a sticky note that says, "Remember, there's a sandwich in here."
Right.
and if you're not actually eating the prop, as long as it doesn't get,
which we don't recommend with Juliette Lewis's cigarettes or with Harvey Keitel's glasses.
Don't eat the glasses.
There we go. I brought it back around. So one last question before we wrap it up here.
Here's where you want to wrap. All right, sure.
I just have one thing that I want to ask you guys.
Yeah.
The Titty Twister Yelp review. What would you give it? 5 out of 10?
Who lived to review it?
Like I said, surely not every crowd they get every night gets massacred.
I mean, maybe.
I'm sure some people.
Well, and they have, since, the vampires probably give themselves, fake self-reviews.
You know what? That's a good point. They probably voted up. I would
get people to come.
I expect to see at least one review where maybe they didn't kill the trucker, but it's just like 7 out of is it out of 5?
I think it's I don't know.
The live music's to die for.
Like 4 out of 5. I had a great time at the bar, but someone stole my fucking truck.
Yeah.
That and the fact that you have Python chick dancing for you.
Oh, there was a snake lady with her tits out.
I've never been a fan of Selma Hayek.
I'm sorry.
I don't think she's ever grown into anything decent. I think I've
that's
seen
nuts.
maybe one performance.
What
of hers.
the actual hell?
And it's not Frida. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Selma Hayek. But I think she did something that I really liked really a lot. I can't remember what it was, but
Selma Hayek. She did something Stan liked once, but he can't remember what it is.
But when she turns into a vampire, the evil princess vampire, queen vampire.
Princess Vampire. It's the worst children's book I've ever read.
The worst Disney princess ever.
They have some sort of weird little small girl vampire show on Disney.
What's the line? I wonder if your blood tastes as sweet as your brother's or something like that.
Yeah.
Which she does a nice reading of, and then the whole, and this is where the foot fetish connection happens.
Oh,
is the whole wine or beer down the leg.
Well, I started to include this as its own separate topic, but was this peak
Feet.
foot fetish?
This was, I would say it's peak foot fetish because I don't think it's done very much
He actually
later.
got to drink champagne off of Salma Hayek's foot in this movie.
After doing the whole scene with Juliette Lewis's feet before he does I'll do what you
This is the feetiest of Tarantino
It's the
stories. So Stan,
Was it
what
Fools
would
Rush
your
In?
what would your Yelp rating be for the Titty
Titty
Twister?
Good floor entertainment. The floor entertainment's is to die for.
All right. Well, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. Would recommend. Guys, thanks for being part of this truly insane discussion. It was all over the place, just like the movie is,
Was
so
it
I
Spy
find that
Kids 3D?
fitting.
She is good in Spy Kids. I would give her that.
Sadly, this episode brings an end to our 5 or 6 weeks of continuous coverage that we've done, which has been
You
kind of
lucky
nice
bastards.
between all 3 of our podcasts. So, listeners, over the next couple of weeks, you can look forward to our continuing Tarantino discussion with the movie Jackie Brown. We're going to be doing another non-Tarantino related episode in about 2 weeks. And then the WWE has Backlash coming up on July 19th. So you can
They
Did
already
they
did
do
Backlash.
I'm not,
Backlash?
it's
It was
not Backlash. Extreme rules. Yeah.
Well, maybe if depending on how this thing shakes out with a bunch of people testing positive,
Oh yeah. I haven't heard anything about that.
including Renee Young, one of their announcers.
I did hear that. Okay, so maybe there won't be a new episode of This Is a Work.
We'll see.
And there might be a new episode of This Is a Takeover next month in August if they manage to do another Takeover pay-per-view. So Stan, your social media distancing still. Chris, if people want to find you online, how can they do that?
I guess they can argue with me on Twitter at ChrisTheOK.
Nice. If you want to follow me online, you can do that on Instagram. That's probably the best place, at DB Hensley. Pretty soon, once I actually sit down and do it, we will have our own Twitter feed because Chris was gracious enough to set that up for us. I just need to make it work now. And if you want to hear more of our old episodes, you can do that by following the links in our show notes, and you can also see some of our original content on YouTube. So thank you very much for listening. If you enjoy the show, please make sure to leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform.
On Yelp.
On Yelp, and also on whatever platform you are listening on.
Peace out.